Tonight, kicked out. Running back Ray Rice is fired by the Baltimore Ravens and suspended by the NFL after a video shows him striking his then fiancee. James Brown has the video and the story. Flooding in the desert, Terry Okita on the record rainfall in Arizona. Just in time for the new school year, hundreds of kids come down with a rare virus Dean Reynolds has detailed. And Mark Phillips on the real Game of Thrones.
With that growing family, your prospects of becoming king reduced, don't they?
Great.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. Scott's on assignment. I'm Bob Schieffer. The Baltimore Ravens decided today they had had enough of star running back Ray Rice. They fired him, and the National Football League immediately suspended him indefinitely. The actions came after new video surfaced showing Rice striking his then fiancee and apparently knocking her unconscious. Rice was already under a 2-game suspension after earlier video had showed him dragging her from an elevator. This new video tells the rest of the story. CBS News special correspondent James Brown has our report, and we warn you the pictures are disturbing.
The new video was obtained by TMZ.com. It shows Rice and Janae Palmer, who was then his fiancée, inside an Atlantic City hotel elevator. Rice strikes Palmer, knocking her against a railing and then onto the floor. Previously, the only video seen was from outside the elevator, showing Rice dragging an apparently unconscious Palmer and letting her fall to the floor. Public reaction to the new video was swift. The video went viral. There were about 1 million tweets by late this afternoon. Broncos tackle Terrence Knighton, quote, "That man should be thrown into jail." Sean O'Hara, a former New York Giant, called it despicable. The Ravens listened and issued their own tweet, quote, "Ravens have terminated running back Ray Rice's contract this afternoon." Minutes later, Commissioner Roger Goodell issued a statement putting Rice on indefinite suspension. The NFL said, quote, "No one in our office has seen it until today." Goodell's initial suspension of just 2 games prompted widespread criticism the punishment was not enough. 2 weeks ago, Goodell announced a new league policy for domestic violence offenders, making it a 6-game suspension for a first offense and a lifetime ban for a second offense. Domestic violence expert Ted Bunch consulted with the league on the new policy.
It's unfortunate that we have to actually wait to see a video in order for us all to have a higher level of urgency around it, because it's not just the NFL. All of us see it, and now we believe it.
Ravens head coach John Harbaugh said this after practice today.
When someone that you care about does wrong, you know, and is faced with the consequences of doing wrong, and rightfully so, it is tough. It is hurtful. And my pain is for both of them as a couple. You know, and going forward, my hope is that they can make it work.
Rice has not responded to today's developments. Last May, he sat at a news conference with Palmer, who is now his wife, sitting by his side. And in July, he apologized.
That's not me. My actions were inexcusable, and you know that's something I have to live with the rest of my life.
JB, the question I have is, why is the National Football League just now getting to see this part of the tape?
Bob, I did talk with the commissioner's office, and it was indicated to me that there was a request for all and any footage relating to this incident, and that the Atlantic City Police did not release it because the prosecutor's office said, do not release the tape.
Now, these contracts, like some in baseball, are not guaranteed. As I understand it, he'll get no more money from the Baltimore Ravens. But do you think there's a chance he will ever play again in the National Football League?
There is a chance. Whether or not it's probable or not remains to be seen, but because he was suspended indefinitely, he is allowed to apply for reinstatement later, and I'm sure the commissioner will look at whether or not he has completed his counseling program and whether he is deemed fit to return to the league.
All right. James Brown. Well, thank you, James. The Southwest has been so dry for so long, but overnight it was as if somebody had opened the faucet. The remnants of Hurricane Norbert dumped a record amount of rain on Phoenix, so much rain, the governor declared a state of emergency. Terry Okita now with that.
Hey, it's starting to rain.
Rescue crews struggled to save more than a dozen stranded motorists in flash floods across Arizona. In Tucson, a woman died after getting trapped in 15 feet of water. Rescuers had to wait until the water receded to recover her body. Drivers in Phoenix pushed their way through high water on their morning commute near the I-10 freeway. Jessica Lunsford got stuck on her way to work.
Driving to work, I couldn't see a thing, and I got here and my car started to get flooded, and they just finally let us go, but I can't move my car.
More than 3 inches of rain made this the wettest day in Phoenix since record-keeping began in 1895. The rains are caused by what's left of a tropical storm from the Pacific. KCBS meteorologist Evelyn Taft.
We're looking at pretty severe storm cells. They're stalling over one area for an extended period of time. And when that happens, the ground becomes oversaturated. So it really just can't handle all of that rain at once.
That same weather system also contributed to storms that dumped up to 3 inches of rain in parts of Southern California. Garages and basements flooded in Riverside as high winds toppled power lines and trees. Even with the rainfall, some parts of California are still 50% below normal. In Yosemite National Park, hikers had to be airlifted out as firefighters worked to contain a wildfire that tripled in size to 2,500 acres. Flash flood watches remain in effect for the mountains and high deserts, but the National Weather Service says the worst of those storms has passed through both California and Arizona. Now, Bob, it's heading to Nevada.
All right. Thank you very much, Terry. U.S. warplanes hit ISIS targets in northern Iraq again today. The president said yesterday he will deliver a speech on Iraq Wednesday, but the White House had no details today, declining even to say if it will be delivered during the day or Wednesday night. Major Garrett is at the White House and Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill. Major, to you first, are you getting any indication of what the president has in mind here?
Well, Bob, this is not going to be a speech declaring war on ISIS, but a speech declaring a presidential commitment to see that it is defeated. The air war in Iraq will continue, but the United States will rely on other nations to provide arms, equipment, training, intelligence, and in some cases cash to defeat ISIS. The president will not rule out airstrikes in Syria or, if the need arises, sending special operations forces there, but he will rule out combat forces in Syria and Iraq. And speaking of Iraq, Bob, the White House a moment ago just hailed the formation of a unity government in Iraq, a step it believes is crucial to rallying long-dispirited Iraqi forces to take back up the fight long abandoned against ISIS.
And Nancy Cordes, how's all this going down on Capitol Hill?
Well, Bob, lawmakers tell us that the president needs, first and foremost, to convince the American people in that speech that ISIS poses a threat to U.S. national security, that it's more than just a regional problem. And that's crucial because if Congress has to take a vote at some point in the future on striking ISIS, these lawmakers want to be sure that their constituents are behind them. They also want to be kept in the loop, and that is a concern that the White House is trying to address. We saw the Director of National Intelligence and the CIA Director up here on the Hill briefing key lawmakers behind closed doors today, Bob, and they're expected back up here tomorrow.
And Nancy, about the president's announcement yesterday, he would take no independent action to ease the immigration situation until after the election. What does Congress think about that?
Well, Democrats who are up for re-election in conservative states think it's pretty great. They want to have to deal with as few presidential decisions that they need to justify to their constituents between now and November as possible. Republicans had warned the president not to try to take unilateral action. They said it would be unconstitutional, so they see it as a victory of sorts as well.
Major, why did the president decide to do this and say this?
Well, first, it's worth pointing out, Bob, that in so doing, the president ignored the promise he made to take this executive action and the timetable he put forward, saying it would be done at the end of summer. Now, the White House today tried to describe that as an act of courage, but as Nancy just pointed out, many Senate Democrats had pleaded with the White House to delay this action. Now, the White House said today pushing all this until after the midterm elections will make the president's decisions, whatever they are, more politically viable. That may or may not be true. What we know for a fact is true, Bob, is that Senate Democrats and their fate will not be hanging in the balance waiting for this action.
Okay, Nancy and Major. Well, tomorrow on this broadcast, Scott Pelley will be reporting from Iraq with the latest on the ISIS threat. Back in this country, an alarming story tonight. Hospitals in 12 states are filling up with children who've been hit by an unusual virus. It starts out like a common cold, but quickly gets serious. Dean Reynolds now with more on that.
11-year-old River Johnsons thinks he probably caught this virus at school last Friday.
A lot of kids were sneezing. I got sneezed on like twice. It's pretty nasty.
We spoke to River and his mother, Christina Coleman, at the Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, where he was admitted early this morning, gasping for air.
What did it feel like in your chest?
It felt as if somebody was pressing on my chest.
You just couldn't get a breath?
No.
He's one of hundreds of children, from infants to teenagers, in possibly a dozen states where much more severe respiratory problems than normal have been reported. There have been no fatalities, but an unusual number of hospitalizations. The suspected culprit is enterovirus 68, an uncommon strain of a nonetheless common virus that typically hits when school starts. But this is worse than the common cold, much worse.
For about 30 seconds, I wasn't able to breathe at all.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
There is no treatment for enterovirus 68, but the body's immune system and medications can be used to alleviate the symptoms, which are worse in people with pre-existing conditions like asthma. It can last about a week. Good news for River.
So he could be back in his classroom at the end of the week.
Correct, with a lot of homework to catch up on.
So far, Bob, Colorado appears to be the hardest hit state, with some 900 cases of this virus reported in the Denver area during the last 3 weeks.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dean. In a moment, what the police in Ferguson, Missouri could learn from the LAPD. And fire destroys part of a classic roller coaster when the CBS Evening News continues. We have had 2 high-profile cases this summer of unarmed black men dying in confrontations with white police officers. The federal government is investigating the police department in Ferguson, Missouri, after the shooting death of Michael Brown. And today, New York Police Commissioner William Bratton announced officers will get annual training in the use of force following the chokehold death of Eric Garner. Bratton once served as police chief in Los Angeles and helped to institute reforms that continue there today. John Blackstone now on what other police agencies can learn from the LAPD.
It's a normal, busy day for LAPD officers in South Los Angeles. But in the public housing projects of the Watts neighborhood here, police seem as determined to make friends as they do to make arrests. Officer Tiffany Norwood serves in what is called the Community Safety Partnership.
These kids look up to us as a mentor, a father figure, a mother figure, a close auntie.
It's a change from how police were seen here less than a decade ago.
The relationship back then, it was hostile. There was mutual disrespect. There was mutual fear. Is there a crime involved in that?
Captain Philip Tingarides took command of the community police station here in 2007. He led his officers in changing attitudes and changing language.
There's a difference between telling somebody, hey, can I talk to you? And, hey, get over here.
2 decades ago, the LAPD was best known for incidents like the 1991 beating of Rodney King that led to riots against police brutality. No more Rodney King! Could you have believed that the day would come when the LAPD would be trusted?
No.
Civil rights attorney Connie Rice became known in the 1990s for suing the police.
Well, no one else would tell LAPD, you can't shoot people in the back when they're fleeing from you. You can't beat people to a pulp just because they mouthed off to you.
In 1999, the Rampart scandal revealed widespread misconduct and corruption in the LAPD. Under supervision of a federal judge, the department was forced to change. Connie Rice headed the panel that recommended reforms.
We knew this was the last chance that we had to get this police department to understand they serve the poor black population.
Hands up, don't shoot! The relationship is far from perfect. Protests followed the fatal police shooting last month of Ezell Ford, an unarmed, mentally ill man. Police Chief Charlie Beck met critics and promised a transparent investigation as the LAPD tries to hold on to the gains made through its community policing. John Blackstone, CBS News, Los Angeles.
One of Southern California's favorite wooden roller coasters caught fire today. The Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain is being overhauled and will be part of a new ride that's supposed to open next year. The cause of the fire is under investigation. The park was closed and no one was injured. What beats a pair of kings in waiting? How about a full house for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge? That story is next. Well, the big news from Great Britain today is that the Duchess of Cambridge is in a royal family way. Here's Mark Phillips.
Elsewhere, wars may be raging and disease rampant, but here the royal household has provided a welcome diversion. Little Prince George, born just over a year ago, is to become a big brother. Not soon. His mother, the palace says, is less than 12 weeks pregnant and is going through the same ordeal of acute morning sickness she had with him. Last time, Kate had to be hospitalized with her illness. This time, she's being treated at home at the palace.
She's feeling okay, thanks. It's been a tricky few days, week or so, but obviously we're immensely thrilled. It's great news. Early days, but I'm hoping things settle down and she feels a bit better.
The royals would have preferred not to have to make the announcement this early, but Kate had a number of royal appearances booked and her absence would have been noticed. In this case, the explanation is a happy one. And it answered the question as to why William showed up without a date at an appearance that Kate was also supposed to be at. Up in Scotland, where the Queen's been at a Highland Games festival, she pronounced herself delighted at the news. It's come at a good time. A recent opinion poll up here has predicted the Scots may turn the British world upside down in a referendum next week and vote to separate from the rest of the United Kingdom. There's a joke going around that the royals may try to convince the Scots to stay by giving the baby a Scottish name. Prince Hamish, maybe, or Princess Bonnie. Whether it's a boy or a girl, the new baby will be fourth in line to the throne, after young George and William's father, Prince Charles. It's the old royal heir and a spare tradition in action. Prince Harry moves down to number 5.
The family continues to grow. And of course, with that growing family, your prospects of becoming king reduced, don't they?
Great.
Kate had been scheduled to take on more of a royal role in the coming months, even going on a solo foreign trip to represent the Queen. Now the palace says they'll take everything day by day. Kate's royal role may be played out closer to home. Mark Phillips, CBS News, London.
In California, trucks may soon replace wells as the only way to get drinking water. That story is coming up next. Finally tonight, that rain that finally fell in Southern California overnight won't do very much to ease the drought, which is now in its 3rd year. The entire state is bone dry. So what happens when the water runs out? Well, Ben Tracy reports in some places it already has.
Hi, love. How are you doing?
For more than 2 decades, Kathleen Sturkey has been working with developmentally disabled adults.
She's wonderful at swimming.
Sturkey and her husband Chuck run a 65-acre residential community outside of Los Angeles called Lark Ranch. 103 adults live here. They use 11,000 gallons of water each day.
I imagine on a daily basis you deal with a lot of challenges just given the work that you do. How does water stack up?
Water has become our primary challenge at this time.
The drought has dried up the ranch's underground wells, and in January, the water ran out.
It's bad enough that we have to purchase water.
The trucks roll in every other day, 100,000 gallons each week.
What does this tank represent to you at this point?
Life.
The water is held in this large tank on the hill. Chuck Sturkey says this is not just about keeping the faucets running.
Looking around here, it is tinder dry. Does fire concern you?
Definite, more than concern, almost to the point of being terrified. The ultimate disaster would be to have a fire and we're low on water, because all I could do is just stand here and watch things burn.
You're almost out, honey.
So they are teaching their residents how to conserve water, but not telling them why.
They would be very, very frightened. It's not that we're trying to hide reality from them, but we try to give them as good a life here as possible.
These water deliveries will cost $150,000 this year alone.
Are you worried about the future of this place?
I think in the back of my mind, but I'm not done fighting for Lark Ranch yet. You're doing a good job.
After all, she has 103 reasons to keep praying for rain. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Saugus, California.
And that's the news. Scott will be reporting from Iraq tomorrow night. In the meantime, I'm Bob Schieffer, CBS News in New York. Good night.
The world faces a terror group like no other. Scott Pelley takes you inside Iraq to understand ISIS. This week on the CBS Evening News. Original reporting.